second.
This is the BAM podcast with Malcolm Springer.
Scott Shepard. Okay, you were not only a really good friend of mine growing up, but I was sitting around the house thinking, like, who could I have on the podcast that just like a really a guest that like doesn't really have anything in music, like just a person of what I call special interest,
Mm-hmm.
And I thought of you, and I told Tiffany, I'm like, I'm going to call him and see if he'll do this. And thank you for being here.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Just a little bit of our background. We grew up together.
Mm-hmm.
Scott was one of my best friends growing up, and he moved off, and I ended up living with his father in down in Spring Hill.
Yep.
While I started here in Nashville as an engineer. So you were a chief warrant officer in the Army.
I was. Yep.
And you flew a Black Hawk.
Right. I flew UH-60 Black Hawk, and my mission set the whole time I was in the Army was as a Medevac pilot.
Well, how many tours in Iraq did you do?
I did. So when I graduated flight school, my first assignment was to Korea.
Oh wow!
A lot of new pilots get sent to Korea. It's where you kind of cut your teeth. There's a lot of mentorship there as a new pilot. You get a lot of training, and it's a good environment where you can focus on learning mission tactics and under the guidance of senior warrant officers. And it's a good learning environment to grow and become more competent. So I was in Korea for a year, and during this time, this is 2003, the Army was doing a realignment, and so they ended up decommissioning our unit in Korea. And they moved the entire unit to Fort Campbell into the 101st Airborne Division. So we were integrated as a medical evacuation unit in the 6th Battalion of the 101st Airborne at Fort Campbell.
Okay, but then you I'm just trying to figure out, where'd you go? You went to Iraq from Korea?
After our unit moved from Korea to Fort Campbell, we were in Fort Campbell physically for about 8 months, and then we deployed. Our battalion deployed to Iraq.
And we talked about last night too, like Operation Iraqi Freedom. You are on the I got down the OEF.
Right. So there were different phases in the Iraq mission, and the period that I was in Iraq, 2004 to 5.
Right.
I don't know if a lot of people will remember this or not, but during the time that I was there, it was the first time that the Iraq citizens were able to have a free and fair election.
That's right. That's right. You did talk to me about this. Yeah, tell everybody about that.
So before that, the elections in Iraq were a farce. Saddam Hussein would win, 99% of the vote or something ridiculous. The elections were not correct. They were not done in a process that was a democratic process where the citizens would vote for who their choice was, and if you ran against Saddam Hussein, you may have an unfortunate accident, and
right.
You don't survive. So, but I was in Iraq during the period when they had the first democratic election, and it was a pretty big deal for the Iraq citizens. I remember a lot of journalists were doing stories where they would, show pictures of women with ink on their finger, because they had never been able to vote before. Women in Iraq were not allowed to vote before that. But that vote pretty much marked the transition between the phases of the operation in Iraq. It was Operation Iraqi Freedom when I first got there, and then after that election, it became Operation Enduring Freedom.
So you showed me, like, if we could cut right now to where Scott was stationed on the Iraq map. I have it up there, Jackson. There's a map that you were in Tikrit. How do you say that?
It was Tikrit. And
Tikrit. I'm sorry.
That's the city,
Right.
but the base that I was stationed at was Camp Spiker.
Camp Spiker, and so that was. It doesn't really say how many miles it is about north of Baghdad. I didn't ask you. Where I didn't ask you this question yesterday, so you're not prepared for this one. Where did they find Saddam Hussein? Wasn't it close to there?
I believe they found him in Baghdad. Yeah.
Oh, they found him in Baghdad.
I believe so. I may be mistaken on that, but I think he was around Baghdad somewhere.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they found him. I'm just going off of what I remember here, and I may be completely wrong, but I think he was hiding in a like an underground bunker.
Right.
And they found him in there. Just like a rat in a hole. They found him in there and pulled him out, and he ended up going through a trial in Iraq where he was sentenced to death, and they eventually hung him.
Right.
Iraqis did. Yeah.
So, my question about Iraq, and we're going to move on. Was he the tyrant that everybody said he was? From your point of view, I know you did.
So
some work.
there's two ways.
Missions there.
There's two ways to look at that. When you talk about him being a tyrant, was he a tyrant? Yes. And were his sons tyrants? Yes. His sons were horrible. They would pick women up off the street, rape them, and there were no consequence to their actions whatsoever.
Wow.
The Iraqi population, they had to live under this regime of oppression. You couldn't speak out against the government. You couldn't speak out against Saddam Hussein. There was very little freedom for the population there. And but on the flip side of that, Iraq, for the most part, was stable. When you look at on a global scale, with Iraq providing 17% of the world's oil supply,
Right.
things were stable. In Iraq under Saddam Hussein, human rights violations by the regime were definitely happening, but on a global scale, the oil supply was stable. But when Iraq invaded Kuwait, which kicked off Desert Storm, that destabilized the oil supply throughout the world, and a lot of the journalists and media, they referred to the war in Iraq as a war for oil. I don't have that opinion, because to me, if it was a war for oil, we would have got the oil,
Right.
as the victors there. But
We did, but we didn't get the oil.
no, we didn't, seize the oil. What we did was secure the oil for the Iraqi people and the Iraq as a nation. We secured the oil. So in Desert Storm, Iraq invaded Kuwait, and what the objective there was to push Iraq forces back out of Kuwait, back into Iraq, and secure Kuwait, since Kuwait was our ally.
Right. I guess the big question to you, and you can say it on here. I mean, do you feel though that Iraq was a waste of time? Do you feel like that we really accomplished our goal over there? I mean, us as civilians, it looked to us, to me as a civilian, not a military guy, that it seems to me like it was a waste of time, especially if we didn't get anything out of it. But you're not saying that some of our oil companies didn't go in there and take over the oil wells and stuff, and but do you feel it was a waste of time?
To back up a little bit,
Okay.
when Saddam Hussein made the decision to invade Kuwait, I feel that it was our obligation, with Kuwait being an ally. It was NATO's obligation to push Iraq back out of Kuwait. I mean, you can't have the entire world destabilized with, the oil. So that would wreak havoc on economies all over the world. And not only that, there was Saddam Hussein was trying to increase his land mass, his oil capability, and it just wasn't. It wasn't appropriate for him to invade Kuwait. So we did have an obligation to push the Iraqis back out of Kuwait and secure Kuwait. And I agree with that 100%. I think that was the right thing to do, and I think that Desert Storm was executed in a efficient manner, in that we limited the time that we had troops on the ground. We didn't get caught up in a quagmire of years and years of war over there. The objective was to get the Iraqis out of Kuwait, and that objective was met, and that was the end of the mission. So
how many years did that take? How long were we in Iraq? I mean,
oh geez, I would need to look it up.
Okay, I didn't.
We were in Iraq for years and years, but that was subsequent to Desert Storm. Desert Storm didn't last very long. Desert Storm was over pretty quick. We ramped up forces and pushed. We actually pushed Iraq troops all the way back to Baghdad. So we did go into Iraq pushing them back, but the mission was accomplished by getting them out of Kuwait. So
right.
Once that was accomplished, then the combat operations were, when Kuwait was secure, combat operations were over for the most part. And then years later, we go into the second war with Iraq with
right.
weapons. They apparently had weapons of mass destruction.
That's what I was going to ask. What was there? Was there any weapons? What was there? Did we ever find anything? And how did that? Because you were telling me a little bit about how that whole thing got started. Like how we thought they had weapons of mass destruction, and which is completely silly. If I remember the story correctly, could you tell everybody how that happened? Because that's a big question. I mean, not many people understand what happened.
So the media portrayed anything going on in Iraq as a war for oil, no matter what, and they never looked at, well, who's getting the oil? If you secure this oil well, if the United States forces secure this oil well, I mean, who's getting the oil? Is it BP? Is it, some American company?
Right.
That's not the case. The oil went to Iraq as a nation. So
okay.
That's the first thing. The second thing is weapons of mass destruction. The short answer is they did not have the weapons that our intelligence agencies were reporting to our government, high levels of our government, up to the president. It turns out after the fact that Iraq did not have the weapons that were claimed to be there. Things like nerve agents, anthrax, dangerous chemical weapons. And as part of Desert Storm, the U.S. and our allies imposed sanctions on Iraq, where they had to allow weapons inspectors to come in to their facilities and do inspections to limit their military capabilities, since they had already shown aggressiveness towards Kuwait and willingness to invade, Kuwait. That was part of the sanctions, and so the weapons inspectors would go in, they would inspect the facilities. But another part of the sanctions was that Iraq was supposed to report their capabilities, their own weapon stockpiles, their own inventory, if you will, of weapons that they had on hand that were ready to use. My personal opinion, from what I've read and everything that I've learned over the years, is Iraq bloviated on that. They in their own self-reporting of what weapons they had in their inventory, they inflated the numbers to make themselves look more powerful than they actually were. So that information...
That is so, to me, that is incredible, because they brought this on themselves.
In a way, but what the worst thing about it is, after the fact, when you're Monday morning and quarterbacking the whole deal, everybody forgets that part. The media says, oh, the government rushed in, we send troops into Iraq and for searching for weapons of mass destruction. They turn out not to be there. Well, Iraq said they had them themselves. So if you work for the United States government in our intelligence, I mean, that's something to consider, that maybe what they're reporting is not the truth. But when you analyze that, you would think, is that really in their best interest to do that? And so I think, I'm not in and never was in our high level of intelligence, with our government, but my opinion is just an average guy, is that Iraq bloviated on what they had. They inflated their numbers. They made themselves look more powerful than they were, and our intelligence agencies believed it and reported it up through the president, and they appeared to be more of a threat than what they actually were. So when the war kicks off and we go in there and we're trying to find these weapons of mass destruction, they're not there because they didn't exist to start with.
Wow.
But
that's amazing to me.
But we do know that Iraq had nerve agents, because Saddam Hussein used nerve agents on their own citizens.
Right.
So we do know that they had had some weapons.
Didn't they? Didn't he kill an entire town or whatever?
Right. Yeah. There was a city.
So that's true. That's true. That's not just media.
No, that is a true story. They used nerve agents on their own citizens.
But why?
Well, I'm not an expert on the different factions that exist in the Iraq population. So I would be afraid to,
Okay.
I would be afraid to delve into that because, I'm just not knowledgeable enough about it.
So Saddam Hussein was a true asshole.
Oh yeah, he's
an asshole.
Oh, he was a prick. Yeah.
Wow. Well, you know what's funny is I read something. He actually claimed to be the reincarnation of Nebuchadnezzar from the Bible.
Really?
Yes, and Nebuchadnezzar, everybody knows he was an asshole.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it's like, hey, he claimed to be, and actually put his name on the money and stuff like that, or his face on the money side. And it was exactly how Nebuchadnezzar did it. He did everything like Nebuchadnezzar. And finally, at the end of his life, before everybody caught him, he said, I am the reincarnation of Nebuchadnezzar. And everybody knows he was a real bastard, and really, sorry, he really did it. every time I start using the F word. Anyway, no, but he was, from what I've read in the Bible, he was an absolute asshole. So hey, man, it figures up, and I didn't know, maybe that was one of the reasons why we did some of the things we did. We definitely don't need another Nebuchadnezzar, but anyway, okay. So
I think part of it was, when the United States, they get involved on a global scale on these tyrants that are leaders of different countries and that, and they, if it's in our best interest, they try to get that tyrant overthrown or whatever. But one thing you have to look at is who's the replacement, right? So
exactly. Yeah.
If Saddam Hussein had been taken out strategically as an individual,
right?
Well, next in succession, as with all tyrants, it runs up in families. So Uday and Qusay were his sons, so one of his sons would have taken over, right? And they were more brutal than Saddam Hussein was. So,
well,
so
they got them too, didn't they?
Oh yeah, they got killed. But but what I'm getting at is if we as a country, if we would have looked at it and said, hey, we don't want to do this ground invasion and all this stuff.
Right.
Let's just take out Saddam Hussein because he's a tyrant. Well, you have to look at the repercussions of that, and for Uday or Qusay to move into Saddam Hussein's role, well, it would have been way worse than Saddam Hussein. So none of them were a good option for the stabilization of oil and stabilization of the Middle East, right? So, and I don't mean to keep bringing up oil, but it's just a fact of life that there's a lot of oil production in the Middle East, and a lot of countries, all countries around the world rely on oil for their industries. And when you destabilize the world's oil supply, that's a global problem.
A major thing.
So, the objective, is to stabilize the Middle East. You stabilize the oil, and you do that in the best way that you can without destabilizing in order to stabilize. If that makes sense, it's kind of counterintuitive, but basically, in my opinion, the United States felt that it would be best to go in, overthrow the Saddam Hussein regime, and then allow Iraq citizens to democratically elect their government leader. So that's where that went.
All right, we're back here, smoking a cigar, and this is what now?
It's a Java Mint.
Java Mint.
Yeah, very tasty.
I haven't had a cigar in a long time. It's been a while. So we're off to Afghanistan now, but we want to back up and talk about in the combat theater how everything is organized with the Medevac and how what all goes like what. I know I saw another helicopter following you, all kinds of stuff. Anyway, just explain to everybody like how that works and what all goes on.
So in air evac, aviation medevac, in the studies that have been done over the years of combat operations, there's what they refer to as a golden hour. A soldier gets wounded. That soldier's chance of survival is a lot higher if he can get to medical care that is beyond just what a medic can provide on the ground. Right. If that soldier can get to a higher level of care within an hour, his chance of survival, increases greatly. So when we deploy to combat, what they would do is they would assign 3 or 4 Medevac helicopters to a task force, and that task force is responsible for an area of operation, and they they coordinate it with a forward surgical team to be at the base, co-located where the Medevac helicopters are located. And basically, you have a circle around that forward surgical team. And when you launch the Medevac, you can get that wounded soldier back to that forward surgical team within the golden hour. And the FST, or the forward surgical team, they can stabilize that patient. And then if it's life, limb, or eyesight, then we can, once they're stabilized, we can move them to an even higher level of care, which would be like a full-blown hospital in theater.
Okay, and I want you to tell the folks out there about your experience. The one thing that stuck out to me was the one that you went to pick up in the middle of a war zone. I mean, you're getting shot at. Everybody's getting shot at. And he wouldn't leave.
Oh. So this dude was, man, I have to say, I was regular Army, right? I was a regular Army soldier. Nothing special. I wasn't a Special Forces guy, none of that. Just regular Army. But I am grateful to the people that we have in our military. We have straight up warriors, right, that love our country, would give their life for our country, right, without hesitation. And we an example of that, we got a we got a call to go on a Medevac mission to pick up a wounded guy, and all the information that we had was a grid coordinate, a GPS coordinate, and what the injury was, and it was one soldier that was injured, and he had a gunshot wound to the neck, and that's all we knew. So we fly out there, and ideally, a Medevac aircraft landing during a firefight. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
A Medevac aircraft landing during a firefight. We'll just cut that part out.
It's okay.
A Medevac aircraft landing during a firefight is not ideal, right? So, because the helicopter becomes the target then, and you get the helicopter shot down, then you got even more problems. So, but there were situations where we would be en route to a point of injury pickup of a wounded soldier, and a firefight would break out while we were en route, or when we were almost there, or something like that. So there were situations that dictated that we did pick up wounded people while an active engagement was going on. So we go pick up this guy and we land, and we don't see any wounded people. Everybody's these guys they're actively shooting, they're engaging the enemy. We landed behind this Afghanistan house wall type thing. We tried to protect the helicopter, so we landed behind that. But the medic jumps out, he runs to go get the wounded guy, he's looking around. Everybody's in the fight. He doesn't see any wounded people, and then he notices this guy's got some gauze around his neck, and it's got a little bit of blood on it or whatever. And he runs over to that guy. This guy is, he's engaging the enemy. He's firing, right? He runs over to that guy and he taps him and he like points at the helicopter, like, let's go, and the guy just shrugs him off and he's like, pow, 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 and he's still engaging the enemy. He doesn't want to go. He doesn't want to go anywhere. He doesn't want to go.
Sorry about that.
But the medic, pretty much grabs him and gets pretty forceful with him, and
Right.
pulls him towards the helicopter. And the guy finally relents and he goes and he gets in the helicopter. He gets in. He doesn't, he doesn't really let the medic do anything with him. The guy gets in. We had a row of seats across the back of the helicopter. Usually the patients are laid down, on the floor of the helicopter, but we had a row of seats in the back, and the guy gets in. He gets in a seat, like no big deal. And he's madder than hell. He is pissed that we took him out of the fight. And turns out he had a bullet wound. Bullet went in one side of his neck, came out the other. And he's still in
That's
the fight.
crazy. So
he's still shooting.
He had a bullet wound all the way through.
Through and through his neck. I don't know how it's even possible that it didn't hit anything vital, and how that man could stay in the fight. But he did not want to leave. He did not want to get evacuated. He did not want to go to the hospital. He wanted to kill the enemy, is what he wanted. And that's all.
Wow.
And
that's insane,
dude. Our military is I couldn't be more proud of soldiers and airmen and Marines and the people that make up our military. We have some straight up,
we have some real badasses in there. Huh?
Just warriors, man. True to the core warriors that love America. And
that's crazy. That's just awesome.
But it's wonderful. It's wonderful that we have people that are willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for our country.
That's insane.
Mm-hmm.
And then that guy survived and everything.
Oh yeah. He was,
but when he got in the helicopter, you told me he was just cussing.
Oh, he was cussing. He was mad. He was pissed. He didn't want to go anywhere. He's like, I don't need to be evacuated. I'm fine.
He had a hole all the way through his neck.
Yeah.
That's like, wow, that's like a movie. That's movie type of stuff.
I remember thinking of flying away. The medic is telling me, he's like on the intercom. I can hear him in my helmet.
Right.
And he's saying, hey, this guy's pissed. He's got a bullet, through his neck. And I'm like, well, that's a patriot right there.
That's a true patriot.
That's a patriot.
And man, whoever that guy is, we appreciate your hard work. So here you are in Afghanistan, and the Afghan war was a lot different though than the Iraq war, wasn't it? Was the vibe different with you and the soldiers? Could you tell the guys that were like special forces? Could you tell that it was a different vibe, or was it the same thing?
Well, my exposure to special forces personnel was limited, right? And the only reason I was exposed really to special forces troops was because our helicopters were co-located on their compound, right?
Right.
Because in Medevac, time is of the essence. So you wanna house the Medevac air crew as close as you can to the helicopters, because it's like a fire department, right? When you get the alarm, you run out to the helicopter and you're off, because a few minutes could be life or death for a wounded soldier. So. It just so happened to be that the Special Forces compound at Tarankout, Afghanistan, which was the base I was at on the second deployment, that was the most ideal place for us to live and park our helicopters. So, but there were, there were a couple other times we encountered SF guys. There was one time we got a Medevac call middle of the night. It was like 2:00 in the morning, and a small group of Special Forces guys had been inserted into this area. And in their pre-planning, they had picked the landing zone and the drop-off point for the SF guys to be a certain grid coordinate. But there was a lot of rain, and that area became flooded that night. And when they got dropped off, they didn't realize that they were inserted onto what was essentially an island because of the flooding.
Right.
They tried to cross, and unfortunately, one soldier was swept away, in the current, and lost. And at the same time, they came under fire from the Taliban, and another soldier got shot through the arm, through the bicep there, and they called the Medevac for that. But when we landed on the island, and the team leader, he said, "Hey, we got a problem here. We're stuck on this island." And so we ended up we loaded everybody on our Medevac bird, and we moved them not very far, but we moved them off of that island and where they could become combat effective again. And then
Right.
And then we went up and down the flooded river, looking for the missing soldier. Meanwhile,
Did you ever find him?
well, he was found. We didn't find him, but meanwhile, the back at our headquarters, the Tactical Operations Center, they're calling us, wondering what we're doing because they can see us on the map. All the helicopters had a device on it called a Blue Force tracker. So they could see us on the map, and they could see that we were flying up and down the river.
Right.
And for whatever reason, their decision was not to have us, search for that missing soldier at that time. But I did it anyway, because
Right. You're trying to find someone who's...
man, if the quicker that person was found, the better, and I was hoping that maybe he was still alive and we could find him and recover him.
What did he survive?
No, unfortunately, no.
Oh man,
Nope.
that sucks.
Nope.
He got swept off in the current.
Yeah, he drowned. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sucks bad.
Yep.
Now, did you ever get like asked to go look for troops like that?
That was the only situation where we were doing a search. Somebody's missing and we're doing a search, but like I said, we weren't authorized to do that.
To do that kind of thing.
Yeah, but doing Medevac, and I talked to you about this earlier. The U.S. follows Geneva Conventions, so medical evacuation, is not an offensive type of operation. It's recover the wounded. We're not supposed to move troops into better tactical positions. We're not supposed to carry weapons or ammunition to resupply, troops. And to me, not saying we did do those things, but hypothetically, if we had the opportunity and they needed it,
you did it.
hypothetically,
Hypothetically.
hypothetically, yeah.
Okay. So
Because I mean that's just stupid. You got guys that are running out of ammunition. They got wounded. If you know that you're going there to recover the wounded, put some bullets on the helicopter and take them out there. I mean,
right.
the some of the rules in Medevac was just pretty far out, man.
Really.
Yeah. I mean,
And we abided by the rules, but the enemy did not.
well, of course, the Taliban never signed on to the Geneva Conventions. It's only it's just pretty much us and our allies, right? And we're not going to fight each other. So, Geneva Conventions, it's a double-edged sword. I'm glad that it's there because it really prevents wartime atrocities.
Right. Well, they can charge them with. They can charge the enemy with war crimes then, or do they even do that?
Technically, they could, but better just to kill them in combat. Better just to kill them.
Right.
Yeah. In my opinion, if they're combatants, better to kill them. So.
Well, because I know that we talked about some stuff at dinner about the situations that you were in, like helping the actual helping the actual people of Iraq and
Afghanistan, yeah,
or Afghanistan. I mean, one situation where a little boy got his legs dipped in boiling water and. Do you know what he was getting punished for? I mean, tell us about that because nobody else knows what we're talking about.
Well,
I'll have him.
If there's a video actually, I don't know if you're going to include it in your podcast, but at the end of the video, you can see that.
Is that the one?
At the end of the video, you can see that the medics are unloading a child from the helicopter, and. Apparently, the story that I got was that the child's uncle, as punishment as punishment for whatever that he deemed that the child did wrong, he dipped his legs into a big pot of boiling water, and. Severe.
That's so sad.
It's terrible. It's terrible. It's the most gruesome thing you could imagine.
His legs were pretty messed up.
Yep, and severe burns, and his mother took him to a forward operating base where Americans were located and pleaded with them for help for her child. And,
poor fella, man.
Of course,
terrible.
They let the they brought the woman and the child onto the base, and they did what they could to treat his wounds, at the forward operating base at within the limitations that they had with the equipment that they had and the personnel that they had. They did everything they could to help the kid.
Well.
But eventually they called a medevac, to get him to a higher level of care, and so we flew out there and picked up the child and got him to the hospital. So.
Did he survive?
Yeah, he did.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's just it's a different culture there. There's just there's a lot of differences in the culture, and it's hard to explain really, but.
So do you think that was a religious thing?
I don't think so. I think that was just
abusive,
just a degenerate person that was abusive and felt that kid needed to be punished, and that's what the method that he chose to punish the child. I mean,
that's freaking horrible.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Well, I mean, not to say that there isn't some idiots in here in America that does.
oh
too.
yeah,
There's idiots everywhere.
there's idiots everywhere, but you know, that was one of the things for me, not just the child, but I mentioned to you, I made a joke, you know, to you yesterday, and not to conjoin a joke with what happened to the child, but you know, me personally, I was as close to being a civilian as you could be, and still being in the Army, right? I was not hut type of guy, right? I was just a normal guy that wanted to be in aviation, and I was able to choose Medevac as my mission set when I got out of flight school. And for me, it was a perfect fit, you know, because I wanted to help people. I wanted to, you know, be able to do something for wounded, you know, primarily our soldiers, to make a difference, you know, to help them be able to get home to their families.
The BAM podcast is brought to you by Huck Hats. Huck Hats are individually created and never duplicated. Huck Hats are custom, high-quality hats made in Franklin, Tennessee. Go to huckhats.com. For a discount on Huck Hats, type in the code 10, and that way he'll give you 10% discount from hearing that on our podcast. So, I guess the question is do you feel that our 20 years in Afghanistan was worth it? Do you think we did any good? Do you think we hurt more than we helped? I mean, what do you feel about it? I mean, you were there, so.
America wanted retribution for 9/11. They wanted some payback, right? And so I understand the justification for going into Afghanistan. Al Qaeda had training camps there. That's where some of the hijackers, the aircraft hijackers that flew the airplanes into the building, into the World Trade Center, they had been there. They had done training there, and that was in Kandahar, Afghanistan. A logical place to get payback for what they did to our country was to go into Afghanistan. But fast forward 20 years, we pulled out. We left them $6 billion of military gear. You know, almost 2,500 dead, you know, soldiers, 20,000 wounded. And for us to leave and leave Afghanistan like we did, and pretty much arm the Taliban with weapons and night vision equipment and, you know, all the stuff that we left there. Personally, you know, I feel like we left Afghanistan in worse shape than when we went in. You know, I was just a lowly warrant officer. I wasn't anywhere near the top of the military, but the I don't feel that Afghanistan should have been a ground war at all. You know, I feel that we could have taken the training camps out with SF teams identifying targets, doing a air campaign to destroy, you know, their assets that they had that they were using for training. I think that would have been a better solution. I don't think it was worth the loss of life and the number of wounded that we sustained to go into Afghanistan. I just don't think it was worth it, you know.
And I know that there's been some people that want to compare that war to Vietnam. You know?
Well, there's a lot of comparisons because Army doctrine is, when you go into a combat zone, you go in as an overwhelming force and you're devastating to the enemy. You devastate the enemy as rapidly as you can. And they did that in Desert Storm, right? They did that in Desert Storm. It worked. It was great. The mission was an incredible success. Vietnam, they had this hearts and minds mentality. You go in, you win the hearts and minds of the local population. You get them on our side, so to speak. Turn them away from communism, right? And then you fast forward to Afghanistan. The idea was hearts and minds, went over the local population, turn them away from the Taliban. It just doesn't work, And how many wars are we going to go into where we get in these years, decades long quagmires that you can't get out of? As soon as we left Vietnam, the North Vietnamese went south and they took over the whole country. So as soon as we left Afghanistan, what happened? The Taliban took over the entire country. So, dude, what we got out of Afghanistan, to me, was not worth. This is just my personal opinion. Nothing I'm saying here today should be representative of the Army or the government or anything. This is all my personal opinion. What we lost in Afghanistan was not worth going there, in my opinion. Right. That being said, we there needed to be some payback for 9/11. Definitely, some people needed to be killed for 9/11. But I don't understand how you jump from, going after these training camps and stuff to a full-blown ground invasion where you're occupying the entire country. All that did was make Americans a target. And it's a fact that fighters that wanted to take a shot at Americans came from all over the world, right, to Afghanistan to fight against the Americans. And, you could say, well, okay, that's good, bring them there and we'll have this battle in Afghanistan and we'll fight it out there. But it just, it's easy to Monday morning quarterback. It's easy to look backwards, and say, yeah, that didn't work out so well. But, I just don't see that a full-blown occupation of the entire country was smart or effective. And this idea of winning over hearts and minds of local populations, it didn't work in Vietnam, it didn't work in Afghanistan, and I think
we should learn from that as a country.
I think that we should learn from that, and in future, in future combat operations, it should be, you should minimize ground forces as much as possible. You don't want to occupy a country, And the other thing that I think and a lot of people may not agree with this, what I'm about to say, but I think it's very arrogant as us as Americans, right, to go into a foreign country and try to persuade them that our way of life, the way that we define a democracy, right? To go into a foreign country and try to persuade the local population that what we think is better than what they think is very arrogant. We need to recognize more that culturally countries are different. populations are different. Everybody may not see that democracy is the best way of life.
Well, I wanted to talk to you a little bit before we move on
Okay.
about your after the military.
Yeah.
You worked for the State Department doing poppy field raids, or was it
Well,
heroin raids? What was it?
So it's kind of a funny story. So, I had deployed. I had spent a year in Korea, a year in Iraq, 2 years in Afghanistan. In my 9 years in the Army, and that's being gone away from home quite a bit.
That was a huge sacrifice, and everybody thanks you for it. The
Yeah.
guys at Save Enable, they had a shout out to you on the phone today.
Well, I appreciate that.
Tell him that he really helped out, and we appreciate him.
Well, thanks for that. But the other thing you need to mention is, you got all these troops that are going on these combat deployments and everything. It's that affects their whole family. And like my wife, their spouses, it's a sacrifice for them too. It's not just the soldier that's wearing the uniform. It's the
whole family.
The whole family, is affected by combat deployments and things like that. So military service is it's an honorable thing to do for your country, but there are sacrifices involved, and it affects your whole family. And I was fortunate enough that my wife supported me being in the military. She supported my service, and she's a strong woman. I knew that when I was in wherever I was, I knew that she was taking care of things at home, and I didn't have that stress of worrying about what was going on back
That's
here.
awesome, man.
Yeah,
That's awesome to have that solid rock.
She's a wonderful, wonderful woman. So,
I want to ask you some more questions.
okay.
I know we've had a long podcast, and I think you're worth it, man. I mean, you are.
I don't.
I'm going to throw you.
I don't see myself as when you asked me to come on this podcast. I told you, I said, man, I don't think my story is very interesting. I'm just the average Joe,
No, you're not either.
But so to get what you had asked earlier, I had told my wife, I said, I'm deploying all the time. I'm gone all the time. I think it's time for a change. And Medevac, doing Medevac, seeing all the wounded people, it does have an effect on you, and I was ready for a change. So I decided to leave. I decided to leave the military, and so I turned in my paperwork to resign. As a warrant officer, you have to resign. So I decided I was going to leave the military. I was going to stop deploying. So I turned in my paperwork. I was on what they call terminal leave, which is I had all these vacation days, if you will. In the military, they call vacation days leave. I had all these leave days built up. So I was pretty much out. I was done with the military, but my separation date was still, a few, about a month away. And I was interviewing with different companies. And while I was in Afghanistan on my last tour, I was talking to some guys that were contractors. And the contract they were on was for the U.S. State Department. They were working in Afghanistan, but they had operations all over the world, pretty much. Colombia, Panama, Honduras, Iraq, Afghanistan. And their mission, the name of the program was International Narcotics and Law Enforcement. And the mission that they had was to either train these different countries, like Panamanians, for example. We would send tactical experts down there to train their police on how to use aviation assets to do drug interdiction, mainly in places like Panama and Colombia and places like that as cocaine interdiction. But I was talking to those guys that were in Afghanistan, and they said, we need a tactical operations officer, and we're short, like 4 tactical ops, TAC ops guys is what they call them. And it just so happened that in the Army, I went to a tactical operations course, as part of not to go down a rabbit hole, but as part of Army aviation, every pilot has an additional skill identifier. They may become a maintenance test pilot. They may become an instructor pilot. They might be a safety pilot. But then they also had tactical operations guys. And I went to the tactical operations course, and that's what they needed on that program. And so I had sent them my resume, and then I finished my deployment. I went home, and I ended up getting a call from them, and they offered me a job, but it wasn't directly for the State Department. It was for a contractor for the State Department. But their mission was to use aviation assets in Afghanistan to do narcotics interdiction, opium interdiction, because the Taliban would use opium production and the proceeds that they made from the opium, they would use to buy weapons and things to fight the Americans.
Yeah.
So if you could, the idea behind it is if you could interrupt the opium production, then you could interrupt their funding to purchase weapons.
So are they? Could you look it up? Are they the biggest in the opium problem here in the United States, or I shouldn't say? They're not. Okay. They're not even close.
So
they just use that to fund their military.
Yeah, they use that. The Taliban used it to fund that in country, right? So so that was the mission that I was on that. So at the at the surprise of my wife, when I was offered that job, I accepted it, and it was right back to Afghanistan for me.
Oh, jeez.
Jeez. So I ended up going back to Afghanistan to Kandahar, and I was flying Hueys over there, and we were doing the narcotics operations. But we would also, since we were since we were a contractor for the State Department, we would also do things like if a congressional delegation came to Afghanistan, we would fly them around. If to different locations so they could tour, go on a tour of the country. We would move the ambassador around the country as he needed to go around the country. We would fly people from the airport in Kabul, because we had operations in Kabul and Kandahar. We would use helicopters to fly people from the Kabul airport over to the U.S. Embassy in Kabul. So it was a interesting program. It was a lot different than Medevac.
I know that I didn't see it, but you said you had a picture of an RPG coming at you.
Well, there was one mission that we went on. There was which this was a pretty common thing that we would do. The DEA was over there, and they would identify opium processing facilities. And Once they were identified, they would insert people on the ground a couple kilometers away, and these guys would go on foot to a overwatch position, and they would watch for a couple days and confirm or deny that it is or it isn't opium production. And if they could confirm that it was involved in opium production, then we would use our air assets with DEA personnel and Afghan police to do a raid, pretty much, on that facility.
Right.
We would fly in the guys at 4:00 in the morning, and they would go kick in the door and seize the drugs and arrest the people involved. So that was pretty interesting. Yeah,
I bet it was.
Pretty neat job.
Okay, I'm gonna get down to some big questions here.
Big questions. All right, I'm ready for big questions.
In the podcast, we've had a big, long podcast, and
I hope it wasn't boring for you.
No, I think everybody would be very interested in your life and what you've done for our country and what you've done for everybody. Period. I want to ask you as a friend and on the podcast.
All right.
So when are you running for governor?
Well, man, here's the thing. I've thought about running for political office, really. I have.
But why wouldn't you run for governor? We need people like you in office. That's our problem with our presidents that we've been having. I feel like if we had a more of a stronger military backgrounded person like you in the presidency, I think that we would be a better. Why not? Why wouldn't you do that?
Well, I would love to continue my service to our country, in a political position. But what's kept me from it is the district. I live over in Knoxville, and the district that I live in, the representatives that we have in the House and the Senate, they're Republicans already. And if I ran for a political office, I would run as a Republican. And the fact of the matter is, unless it's almost impossible for a Republican to unseat another Republican in a primary, right? So in the primary election, it would be a Republican versus Republican. If the Republican has already got the seat, it's almost impossible to unseat them. And our Republican representatives that we have in Tennessee are doing a great job now.
Right.
So, I'm very happy, and I with the representation that we have. So I wouldn't want to unseat those people that we have representing us right now. Maybe in the future, when
as a friend, I think that if I saw you run for president of the United States, I would vote for you.
Well, I don't think.
I think that you would be a great candidate. I think that you. I'm very serious. I think you should, and I know you can get the money behind you. It's like and I think it's something that maybe I hope a light bulb goes off and goes, hey, I got even bigger, better things to do, and I'm going to go run this country because I don't like the way it's being ran. And you know what? And you don't like the way it's being ran because nobody likes the way it's being ran.
No.
And there was a lot of craziness with Trump, even though he did his thing, and if he would have just stopped the crazy talk and all that stuff, I think everything would have been fine.
I love Trump's policies. I did. Every policy he had, I was behind, but the rhetoric on Twitter and the
craziness, all craziness is just be quiet and do your job.
He did not
trying to start shit all the time. That's the problem.
He did not need to be. He did not need to antagonize so much.
Yeah, it's like it's just do your job but shut the fuck up. But it's like, well, the one thing about the presidency I do know is you have to have thick skin.
Oh yeah,
and I think to some degree, I'm definitely. Not going to talk politics on here. I will just say this. it's ridiculous the choices we had to vote for in the last election was. I mean, I saw I don't know about you, but I saw the dang what do they call that when they were sitting there, on TV, the debate, and I was just like. I told Tiffany, I'm like, are you serious? This is what we have to choose from.
Right. That's
no matter what.
I thought the same thing. I was watching the debate and I thought, I looked at my wife and I said, this is a presidential debate. This is the best America has to offer. No way.
No shit.
way
It's like,
that's the
what
best
are we
way
doing with these two guys up there? It's like, I'm
Right.
not bad mouthing Trump. I'm not bad mouthing Biden.
Right.
All I'm saying is, man, we have guys like you that could do it. And I think you should consider running for governor and then eventually being president of the United States because you should do that because I think you got the heart, you got the mind, you got the freaking soul, you got everything. And it's like, what's wrong with and what would be great is, of course, for the podcast is going. I interviewed the president of the United States at one time.
That would be pretty cool. I think my problem is. There are some things that I lean left on, and there's some things that I lean right on.
I do too.
And if you're not, because we have this two-party system, right? If you're not fully on the right with all of their positions, then you're not gonna make the primary on the right. Same thing on the left, but the left has been getting further left and the right has been getting further right. And what I would like to see is a candidate run this country that's in the middle again, back like it used to be.
I'm not going to get into, because you've been to a part of this simulation that we're in that I haven't been to. So Afghanistan, Iraq, all that stuff is like not part of my simulation, but it's nice to, have a friend that experienced that, even though it was kind of traumatizing, I guess, in a lot of ways. But so here goes the big last question. Okay.
Oh, well, one thing before we get to the big last question.
When you go run for governor? Come on.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if that's ever going to happen.
I think you should. I think you really should. I'm not kidding. I'm not joking.
Man, somebody will find some video of me twerking or something. And I'll be out.
Well, obviously that's okay to do that now.
I saw that. Hey, if any of your listeners have not seen your short on the title is "Twerking Politicians." You got to watch it. It's 5 minutes. It's 5 minutes of your time. Unbelievably funny. I laughed for like 2 days. I laughed. It was so funny. I can't believe that's what we've gotten to. That's where we've gotten to. That's our candidates, right? That's
right. And that's why someone like you should run for governor or the Senate, and you should sit and. You should represent the people because you're a damn good man, and that's just the bottom line. And I think that not that the twerking lady was. It's like that's shit you find on a candidate and go, okay, that's the person that I'm not voting for.
Right.
And these days, that's what she's doing for a campaign.
Right. These days, it's like, oh, that's how you get votes. I'm like, what? What? That's who you want? It's crazy, man. It's crazy.
Well, okay, so I'm starting this whole campaign thing, I guess you would say.
All right.
For Mars.
Yeah.
And I want to know.
All right.
Is there going to be a need for Black Hawk officers on Mars? And is there going to be, because we're going to supposedly colonize the thing by 2027. So let's hear your opinion on, or is it going to be wars up there? What's going to happen?
My opinion.
Yeah. Let's hear it.
When we colonize Mars, Elon Musk will be the planetary president.
Okay.
And there will be no wars.
You think he's a pretty good soul?
There will be no need for military equipment. Yep.
So there's not gonna be any sterile mixes on Mars. It's gonna be all Atmos, and now there's gonna be no war.
Yeah.
Wow, this place sounds like a place I might want to go.
Hey, man, I'm a big fan of Elon Musk. You know, people say
I am too.
People say people don't like him just because he's a billionaire. But look what he's done for our society. You know, I mean,
Right.
he's done tremendous things. And I know that with SpaceX, you know, Elon is looking at Mars, going to Mars.
Right.
And I think if there's one person that can pull that together and make that happen, it's him.
Well, I'm going to be on. One of the goals of the podcast here is to have Elon Musk on here, and I believe I can do it.
I hope you get him on here.
I will. It'll take a couple years, but I'm going to get Elon Musk on my podcast because I've got some questions for him behind the scenes.
Well, ask him when my Cybertruck is coming because I got a Cybertruck on order. I've been waiting on it for like a year now.
Really? How much was it to put down on it?
$100, I think.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and put it down on a Cybertruck so I can be on the list because I think there's probably thousands of people on the list.
Millions. Well, not millions, but there's last I read, there was over 1 million pre-orders for the Cybertruck.
Okay, so I'm gonna put down my $100 this next week.
Yeah,
and that way I can have a Cybertruck.
You know, my wife has a Tesla.
How does she like that? Because I thought about getting a Tesla this next round, but we'll keep the Hummer. But I'm gonna keep the Hummer, but I'm gonna get a Tesla. I could get a new Hummer, which is about $110,000, I think.
Wow, that's pretty high.
Well, for the base price.
That's the base price.
That's the base price. So it's probably going to be about $130,000 for me to get the dang thing. But back to your thing.
Yeah,
they have the one-man drone thing that's being sold pretty soon. And I think if you could cut to that real quick, on the podcast, so everybody can see the one-man drone. So I can fly. I can be out in Hendersonville where I live. But I'm gonna buy some acreage out there.
Yeah.
And have it where I can just fly into town and do my one-man drone. But it's basically a helicopter.
Yeah, no stoplights, no traffic.
No stoplights, speed limits, no nothing.
Yeah.
No, the thing about it is, I think you type in your coordinates, it just goes there and lands.
Well, watch out for power lines.
Well, I'm telling you.
That was a big thing with helicopters because, tactically we would fly low. Power lines are dangerous. Yeah.
Wow. Man, thank you for coming, Scott.
Hey, I appreciate the opportunity to share my story, and I'm honored that you would ask me to come on your podcast.
And I got the feeling that this is not going to be the last time people see you because I'm going to have you come on the two rednecks and Junior thing, and we're going to laugh our ass off. I love you. Thank you so much for coming. Brother. Hey, you guys out there, hit the subscribe button. And if you comment on our podcast, we will send you a 10-inch mug or a BAM podcast mug. You have the opportunity to win one of those. So please comment at the bottom and subscribe to our podcast. And thank you, Scott, for coming. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, man.